Yeah, it's working now. I can see you on it.
Erin says she can see me.
National Organization for Women, Charlotte NC chapter is live
Yes.
now.
Oh, well, that's because I stopped on my page, but I started on, I think I'm on your page, on the National Organization of Women, Charlotte NC chapter.
Damn, you look good. I said now website. So.
Her phone keeps cutting out.
People are saying how. I said, I mean the Now chapter's Facebook page. And that's all I know. What else is typing?
Let's see. Hello. They're saying hello. Hey.
How do we do this? They're saying, how do we do this? Oh, I have no idea. Is it the Now, North Carolina Now, right? North Carolina Now chapter.
National Organization of Women, Charlotte NC
Okay.
chapter. Yay! Okay. All right. Melba sees me. So we're good to go. Yay! I'm really sorry about that. I am new to this whole Facebook Live thing. I was blathering on for quite some time, and I'm happy to say that now I'll just call it practice. So anyway, I'm Brooke Adams. I'm the president of the Reproductive Rights Coalition of Charlotte. I've been doing work in this area. I've been passionate about women's rights and abortion access for as long as I can remember, but I've been doing work in this area for about 4 years. And for some time before that, I was momming, and for some time before that, I was an attorney. So this area really hits my sweet spot, as some of my friends have said. I was a religion major undergrad and then going to law school, and the interplay is just, it's both fascinating to me on an intellectual level, and again, something that I'm just absolutely passionate about. Let's start with why abortion access matters. And it seems like a kind of a dumb question in a way, because the obvious answer is if there isn't abortion access, women will die, because people are going to have abortions whether they're legal or not. And the only question is, are you going to have a safe, legal abortion, or are you going to have an unsafe, illegal abortion that, you know, could cause you serious harm or end your life? But to me, it goes much, much, much further than that. Abortion opponents will always say, "No, that's such a small minority of people." Like, that is okay, but beyond that, it's a fundamental issue of freedom and equality. And in my mind, if there is no access to abortion care, then women are never going to be equal. To me, we are all individually human people, and we should be able to direct the course of our lives and identify ourselves in the way that we feel is most genuine. The anti-abortion folks will define us purely with respect to our reproductive capabilities, but that's, you know, while that's a significant part of our lives, it's not the entirety of our lives. And you know, I think that that's the reason why these same people are anti-LGBTQ, because they don't want they want to just reduce everyone to reproductive capabilities. But as a human being, I should be able to define my identity. I only have this one life. I should be able to live it the way I want to. And that means being able to direct the course of my life, and it shouldn't be derailed based on an unplanned pregnancy. In addition, pregnancy and childbirth, child rearing fundamentally life-altering events. Going through the process of pregnancy and childbirth, your body's never going to be the same. Your life is never going to be the same. And so it absolutely frosts me when people, usually male people, will say, oh, this is just a question of, it's inconvenient to you to be pregnant right now. It goes so much beyond that. It's crazy. But the issue is, it's all about just the freedom to live your life the way you feel is most genuine and desirable. We're limited as it is by, our biology and our birth circumstances. So there's no reason in my mind why we should be further limited based on our reproductive capabilities. If you look at there's a study called the Turnaway Study that came out of the University of San Francisco several years ago, and it talks about the effect on women's lives of being denied a wanted abortion. And across the board, their economic, their mental health, all of these markers are significantly lower than had they been able to access an abortion. In addition, the outcome on children is much worse. There have been studies that have shown that, a child that was born from an unplanned pregnancy is likely to have a lower success rate in life. Their parenting situation is going to be very difficult, and their educational attainments tend to be lower. So they're just and you look at all the children who are in foster care, and it's to me, it is fundamentally immoral to require people to become parents when they're not prepared to be. Anyway, all of that is my why does it matter focus. As I get going, though, and I should have said this at the beginning, I did in the previous version when I was just talking to myself. But let me just say here, if you do have a question, or if there's something that you would like to have more clarification on, please just send a comment on the live screen and I'll see it. And or you can message me on Facebook, and I'll try and read your question and answer it as well as I can. I can give you what I consider a very interesting history of of abortion access and abortion rights in the United States over time, but I'm going to, for the moment, assume that you know that and would rather have me spend my time elsewhere. But please, if you'd like to hear about that, just let me know. I would love to talk about that. For the moment, though, we'll just get right to what is the state of affairs with respect to abortion access now in the Trump era, and also in the COVID era. Starting with just the Trump era, assuming that we aren't in the middle of a global pandemic, we've also, it's, I guess, a national pandemic, the Trump pandemic. We've got the impact on the judicial system, where he has packed the Supreme Court with two new conservative judges, and the appellate courts and district courts have been packed with all kinds of new, very conservative judges, some of whom were rated unqualified by the American Bar Association. And that's frankly terrifying. These are lifetime appointments, and these people are going to be in those positions, well, for the rest of their lives, which in my case, or many of us, that will probably be the most of our rest of our lives as well. And so they are going to be the people who are interpreting whatever laws come out of Congress and the states. Right now, as you undoubtedly know, there was a case that was heard in, I think, March, the June Medical Services LLC versus Gee case that had to do with a law that came up in Louisiana that required physicians to have hospital privileges, admitting privileges at a hospital that was in, I don't know, 30 miles or something. And, you know, this is a case that essentially was already decided in 2016 by the Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt case, which said that no, that's an undue burden and the law is unconstitutional. But despite that, well, let me step back. The Louisiana case had been filed prior to the Hellerstedt opinion coming down. And so when the Hellerstedt opinion did come down, the Louisiana court said, well, you know, I think this law is, the district court said, it's unconstitutional. Look what the Supreme Court just said. But then it went to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit said, no, that's all wrong. This case is totally different from the Texas case that also had to do with admitting privileges in hospitals. Because here we don't know that it will close down most of the hospitals in Louisiana. And, you know, it's ridiculous. It turns out that if this law is allowed to go forward, it will actually close down 5 out of the 6 clinics in Louisiana. But anyway, so that was their ruling, and they were going to just allow this law to go into effect despite the Supreme Court ruling. So the Supreme Court kind of had to grant certiorari. They had to hear the case because here was a court that was going directly against a ruling, in my mind, that they had just made. So essentially now we have the same decision that was made in 2016 when Justice Kennedy was still on the court, now being made with Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the court. So we'll see what happens. In the best case scenario, which I'm going to cling to until the issue, until the opinion is issued, is that they just needed to say, hey, Fifth Circuit, you're wrong. And, you know, how about following Supreme Court precedent like you're supposed to? However, there are a number of other less rosy alternatives that could take place. They could say, I mean, they could completely undermine Roe versus Wade and abortion access generally. I don't think that would be a likely outcome because I think that Justice Roberts would be concerned about the long-term effect on Supreme Court precedent, and that it is important to, you know, to uphold precedent. And so for me, I think the more likely scenario is that they try to find some way to narrow abortion access because, you know, this is a 5-4 conservative majority, but without completely reversing Roe versus Wade. So how could that happen? It could happen in one way. It could happen is they could say that, well, there's no right of third-party standing, which essentially allows the clinics and the doctors to come in and say and represent the constitutional right to abortion for their patients. They could do that, although, again, that would be crazy because third-party standing has been upheld over a long period of time. But there will be, most likely in my mind, some little way that they will decide to make this, you know, a way to narrow abortion access. We'll have to just wait and see. The new Supreme Court has also today heard oral arguments on a case called Little Sisters of the Poor versus Pennsylvania and a related case called Trump versus Pennsylvania. And these are 2 cases that have to do with an employer's obligation under the Obamacare to provide contraceptive coverage for their employees. As you know, religious organizations were exempted early on, and then Hobby Lobby established that a religious private corporation could also be exempted from the obligation to provide contraceptive coverage. The Trump administration has gone even further. They've expanded religious beliefs as a reason for not having your religious beliefs as a reason for not having to provide coverage for your employees. They've moved it to, expanded it to also include, you have a moral obligation. Morally, I don't agree that female employees should have access to contraception. Unfortunately for them, they did not follow the Administrative Procedures Act, one of the rules that were put in place, I think in the 80s, that was required in order to put into place new regulations. So these cases have to do with the challenge in that respect. But again, it has to do with how many restrictions can we put on contraception as well as on abortion coverage. It's very, very disturbing that at the same time when we're seeing in the United States, our maternal health rate is appalling compared to other countries in our socioeconomic range. While other countries have found that or have been able to achieve both maternal health and newborn health numbers that have been better, expanding. In the United States, those numbers have been going the other way. And it's particularly the case if you are a woman of color, an indigenous woman, if you are, not in a high socioeconomic status. And these are for all kinds of reasons having to do with race and bias and just the prolonged anxiety and stress of living in the United States under those conditions. Yes. Anyway, so that's where we are. And so to be taking away access to contraception, which seems so fundamental, and making access to abortion more difficult, it's just astonishing, really. Particularly, added on top of that, we have an ever-widening problem of inequality, so this will only add to that. So that's our happy scenario on the federal level. Let's talk about the states. So long before we got into the COVID world, we had states that, encouraged by the Trump administration, were attempting to put in place abortion bans. Fortunately, those have all been tamped down for now. They're trying to get their case in front of the Supreme Court, but that case has not yet come before the Supreme Court. And then COVID world came along. I guess before that, I should talk about just some of the other access barriers that are in place in the states. Mm-hmm. There's a ban in many states on the practice of telemedicine. North Carolina is one of these states. So doctors a patient has to come to a clinic. This one just seems so ridiculous to me. You have to come to a clinic and, have your counseling, and then take your pill in front of the doctor, and then you're given a prescription for the rest of the process. And then you go home. But in other states, it's handled more rationally, where you can be mailed your first pill and then take the remainder of them at home. And that would expand access dramatically. People wouldn't have to drive from a rural area to get to a doctor in a more urban area. And it just, again, it would make access much, much, much easier. Yes. And, therefore safer for women. Mm-hmm. We've got these crazy born alive bills, which fortunately have failed for now. And those are basically just how do we how do we take a law that's already on the books, like the barrier for making murder illegal, and turn it into something that is a tripping point for doctors, making it so that they're inevitably going to end up criminalizing what is a life-saving procedure for a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, those have been so far avoided. We've got TRAP laws, which are the targeted regulation of abortion providers. Those are laws that say, well, your hallway needs to be, wide enough for 2 gurneys to pass, even though this is not something that comes up. Abortion is a very safe procedure. But they basically are imposing hospital standards on abortion clinics. And it's purely for the purpose of increasing the cost and decreasing the ease of access. There are parental notification laws, which require teenagers to, I think anyone under the age of 18, to come in and have their parent sign something, or even come into the clinic with them and say, yes, they approve. And they do have an out for this teenager to go in front of a judge and get judicial permission. But that's a very high hurdle, really. I've seen teenagers do it, and I'm so impressed at their maturity and presence of mind that they can go through this. But I don't think that that's something that, we should just expect every teenager to do. Also, most teenagers who find themselves unexpectedly pregnant will involve their parents. If they have a close relationship with their parents, those parents are already going to be involved. And if they're not involved, there's a reason. There's an abusive parenting situation. There's the pregnancy results from incest. There's a important reason why those parents are not involved. And legislating close family relationships just is not going to work. Then we have bans on allowing insurance and Medicaid funding of abortion. Those are both the case in North Carolina, although other states permit insurance coverage. And some states, I know Illinois allows Medicaid coverage as well, the state portion of Medicaid. But the financial barrier is enormous. And again, this just adds to the unequal healthcare situation that we have in the United States already. A person of means can just fly to another state where it's less expensive or covered by Medicaid. Well, no, I guess it would be Medicaid, where my insurance will be taken, or, but a person who does not have the means is just kind of stuck. And, most of the people who are seeking abortions are already parents. So what you're looking for, what we're looking at is people who are parents being forced to give birth to another child that they know they can't afford, or they're just not, it's not the right time. The family circumstances aren't right. And we're forcing them to bring this other child into their family. Then we come to waiting periods. North Carolina has one of the longest, it actually has the longest waiting period in the country, 72 hours. So what that means is that 72 hours before you can come in and have your abortion, the abortion provider has to talk to you either by, fortunately in North Carolina, it's by phone. In some places it's in person. And they have to give you counseling, which includes at best demeaning and at worst incorrect information. Important nuggets like, if you don't have an abortion, you can go ahead and have the baby. Who knew? But anyway, those are your tax dollars at work. The waiting periods, studies have shown, women who've decided that that's the right decision for them. They want to have the abortion. That's their decision. And the waiting periods don't change that decision. All that they do is make access more difficult. So it means that, it just delays the ability to get the abortion. I've seen situations where we've had patients come into the clinic where I volunteer who haven't been able to eat for 5 days because they have such terrible morning sickness. And, so they've now just been required to wait an extra 72 hours to be relieved of that than they would have normally. And then never mind the whole issue of people who are above the gestational limit. In North Carolina, we don't at the moment have an official gestational limit beyond viability, but lots of other states do. Then we have the states' failure and local governments' failures to enforce the FACE Act, which is the basically a federal, and then there are state versions, law that makes it illegal to interfere with access to an abortion, to a clinic entrance. And here in Charlotte, we've seen this over and over again, where there'll be protesters who are standing in the middle of the driveway. And yes, they will move when a car, is coming in at them. They'll move slowly out of the way, but that just should not be the case. It's very intimidating to patients. They are going up to car windows and, knocking at the window and sticking their heads in the cars. And it's just, a person should not have to undergo that amount of interference in accessing a medical procedure. And federal law, I think, says that, and as well as the state law. It's fine if you want to express your opposition to abortion to stand on the sidewalk, stand, in front of City Hall, don't get an abortion yourself. But you can't stand in the driveway when cars are trying to come in and go out and, interfere with other people's lives. And then finally, from another barrier is the existence and public funding of crisis pregnancy centers. This is a huge issue in North Carolina. Millions of our taxpayer dollars go to fund these facilities that are essentially extensions of churches. They will advertise themselves as a pregnancy resource center or women's healthcare center or women's clinic. And from their websites, it appears that they are abortion providers. They'll say, need an abortion, and then they've got all kinds of things listed. And in nowhere, except maybe in the terms and conditions, will it say, oh, actually, we don't provide abortions or contraception. So women will go in there for the free pregnancy test and the ultrasound, and then they're kind of trapped and subjected to all kinds of shaming and religious messaging. And for the state to be paying to keep these places, to me, it should be illegal because it should be false advertising. But, the state goes beyond that by actually funding with our taxpayer dollars. Taxpayer dollars don't go to fund abortion clinics, but they can apparently go to fund fraudulent women's healthcare centers. So anyway, I think I touched on a little bit, or maybe over and over again, the unequal access. There's a big difference between abortion rights and abortion access. And while under the Constitution, there is a right to an abortion, that does not mean that one has access to an abortion. We have a grossly unequal healthcare system and a grossly unequal economy. And then we have a history of racial inequality as well. And all of those things are enormous impacts on a person's ability to access an abortion. Geographically, There are all kinds of restrictions. I think 80% of the counties in North Carolina have not only no abortion access, but no, they don't have a gynecologist in the county. And then there are socioeconomic and age restrictions as well. A woman who has job security and, a nice full bank account and social capital is always going to be able to go and find high quality healthcare. But, the cost of the procedure, the travel costs, the finding childcare are just enormous barriers for the majority of women. My bestie here, my daughter, is making this much easier by having a conversation with me, which I love. So let's talk about something more positive and hit on, is there anything we can do to fix this mess? And yes, the answer is yes. We can elect new people. At the federal level, there's so much that we could do if we had a Democratic president and then a Democratic Congress. I should say a Congress and president who were willing and interested in reproductive justice. At the federal level, we need to protect the Supreme Court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not going to live forever, although God love her, she's hanging in there so far. I hate to even say that, but we are asking an awful lot of the woman. So we need to stop the packing of the federal court system with conservatives. We need to have the FDA lift its requirement that the medication abortion be, right now, let me start over again. Right now, in order to have a medication abortion, you have to get the pill from the doctor. But that's because of an FDA rule, which if we could have that lifted, then the doctor could call in a prescription to the pharmacy and it could work like every other medication that people take. And you'd still, need to talk to the doctor about what the process was going to be like, what possible side effects you could experience, under what circumstances you would want to contact the doctor or go to the emergency room, those kinds of things, of course. But there's no real reason why you should have to get that pill directly from the doctor. It's crazy. We need to, perhaps most importantly, we need to do away with the Hyde Amendment, which makes it illegal to spend federal tax dollars on abortion. And that means, people say, well, why should I spend money on something I don't agree with? Well, why should I spend money on, the war in Iraq or Viagra or, all kinds of things that maybe, since when have we as a people been able to determine the federal budget? That's ridiculous. But in addition to restricting, poor people's access to abortion, it also means that people serving in the armed forces, Peace Corps volunteers, certain aid workers that are federally employed, they don't have any funding for abortion care. So yeah, it'd be great. We'd elect Biden and get the Senate and let's hold the House. On a state level, you can see what's possible when you look at the state of Virginia, which turned over from basically a Republican governor and legislature to all Democratic. Well, since then they've reversed the abortion restrictions. They had the typical trap laws. They had a rule that you had to have an ultrasound 24 hours before getting your abortion. They had the same kind of, crap counseling that you had to get. And they've reversed all of that. And in addition, they made it legal for nurse practitioners to perform first trimester abortions. That's huge because we have a major shortage of providers in this country, and particularly in the anti-choice South. If nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, advanced practice nurses, maybe some of those are the same thing, I don't know. If you could expand the number of providers, that would be enormous in terms of expanding access to abortion, particularly in rural areas. And then also, if we were able to turn over the state legislature and hold on to the governor's seat, we could get that telemedicine requirement that we need, in terms of at least letting people. Right now in North Carolina, you have to come into the doctor's office and take that first pill in front of the doctor. There's no need for that. You should be able to at least receive it in the mail and then proceed with the rest of the process. But in North Carolina, you have to come in and take it in front of the doctor. So we could get rid of that. We could get rid of the waiting period and all those kinds of things, the parental notification law. It would be huge in terms of in its impact on women's health.
Yeah.
That's really what I've got for now. If there are questions, I'll look for comments, or if you want to message me, that's fine. Otherwise, I can, this is such a weird format. So I will promise you, and I'll promise now, that if, in the post-COVID age, I will be more than happy to come back, and I'll have PowerPoints, I'll have handouts, the whole thing. It'll be real. But in the meantime, this is what we've got. And so it's been wonderful spending this time with you. And I have enjoyed talking to myself. But again, I hope that I get a chance to talk to you in person. That would be wonderful. So with that, I will end the live video, giving people a couple more minutes to ask me a question. Seconds. No? Okay. Have a good night. Bye.